is Andreas Antonopoulos. I'm the author of Mastering Bitcoin, and today I'm going to be talking about money from an evolutionary perspective. The title of this talk is Bitcoin, a New Species of Money. So this topic is something that I've been thinking about for quite a while, and I have a great interest in the subject of evolutionary biology, but I'm not a biologist. And there are probably no biologists in the audience, which is a good thing, because I will say things that will probably upset biologists because I'll get them wrong. So I'm speaking in general terms, and this is more a narrative to help you understand where things are going. So something really important happened on January 3rd, 2009. The world changed. But as with many fundamental and significant changes in the world, very few people noticed. Almost no one noticed. That change started out as a small ripple, and it started spreading. And now we are here 7 years later, and that small change, Bitcoin, is radically rewriting human history and human society. We are part of something unique. We are part of something really special that started as an idea that even the author of this idea didn't believe it would work. And all of the people who looked at the idea and looked at the theory behind Bitcoin had many things to say about how it wouldn't work. And on the internet, some of the most interesting things are things that do not work in theory, but do work in practice. My favorite example is Wikipedia. If you think about Wikipedia objectively, based on what you know about human knowledge, it shouldn't work. Why would anyone spend their time for free writing an article about a single Pokemon card for months? That doesn't make any sense. And yet, people do that. We underestimate human nature sometimes. Bitcoin is like that. In theory, it's difficult to understand how it works, but in practice, it has spawned a revolution. It has created something very new. The era before Bitcoin can be characterized by a short-lived period of time, which started in the beginning of the 20th century with the introduction of central banking. And for the first time, money became completely detached from commodity and became managed on a national basis by central banks. This was a very different model than we had before, and it continues to this day. Many of us in Bitcoin believe that when we look back 100 years from now, we will see central banking as a short-lived and not particularly successful experiment. What Bitcoin started is different, not because it replaces central banking, but because it opens the door to a new form of competition. A form of competition where money can be created on the internet by anyone and be instantaneously global, unforgeable, open, and secure. And with that new system, we not only created a new form of money, but we also created a new environmental niche for money to compete in. In my opinion, with the invention of internet money, we now start to see the first model for a network-centric evolution of money, where different forms of money compete as species. And they compete by finding an environmental niche and adapting to that niche through simple competition. And this has never happened before. The reason it's never happened before is because the environment was hostile to that form of money. Borders, geography, nation states limited the ability of money to spread and compete with other money on a global basis. And what happened on January 3rd, 2009 was a very significant event because what it did is it fundamentally changed the environment in which money competes. And the best counterexample or similar example I can show is a very special moment for the history of this planet when the levels of oxygen in the atmosphere started rising, and they gave the possibility of aerobic metabolism. Aerobic metabolism meaning that species could now metabolize with oxygen. And before that, all species were anaerobic. They metabolized without oxygen. They lived in an oxygen-free environment, and for them, in fact, oxygen is toxic. Oxygen is an oxidizer. It's poison to an anaerobic organism. It's like an acid. It destroys them. What happened when the environment changed to allow aerobic metabolism was suddenly a whole new environment opened up for species to compete. Species that were not competing with the previous species because they operated in a completely different niche. And they had a significant advantage because aerobic metabolism is an order of magnitude more efficient. And within a very short period of time, the planet changed. And aerobic organisms got pushed into the deepest crevices of the world. They still exist at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, buried in glaciers, inside volcanoes, in places where oxygen doesn't reach. They still exist. They haven't gone away. But this is now a planet of oxygen-breathing organisms. The world changed. And one of the interesting things about evolution is that it doesn't work in a linear fashion. It works through a process that has been called punctuated equilibrium. Things have equilibrium for a long time, and then suddenly there's a great rush of evolution as a lot of things change. New environments open up, and species evolve very rapidly in a short period of time, and then they reach equilibrium again and persist for thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of years, and then again something changes. Some environmental factor, some external stimulus, some advance in evolution. Species able to create DNA instead of RNA, oxygen in the atmosphere, or, for the dinosaurs, a meteor, or other geological event. On the 3rd of January 2009, a meteor appeared in the sky of our society. And until that time, banks were the kings of this planet, like giant lumbering dinosaurs, completely dominating for hundreds of millions of years, with complete disregard, even contempt, for the tiny little furry mammals. For the tiny little furry mammals that they routinely step on as they walk around the planet. But something has changed, and very soon, those mammals will inherit the earth. In this new environment, we don't compete against banks with Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is adapted to a different environmental niche. Bitcoin is not the money of the physical space. It is the money of the internet. Bitcoin is not the money of the nation state. It is the money of the world. Bitcoin is not the money of the current generation. It is the money of the generations to come. And it doesn't compete against banking because for Bitcoin, banking and borders and physical money are irrelevant. Just like to mammals, dinosaurs were irrelevant, and to aerobic bacteria, anaerobic bacteria are irrelevant unless they're suitable as food. When you look at this environmental niche, you have to realize that it's not just one species of money, not just one new species of money, Bitcoin, but an explosion in the ecology of money. On January 3rd, 2009, there were 194 currencies. Today there are more than 3,000 currencies. And of those, all but 194 are digital, decentralized internet monies. They're the new species that live on the internet. And most of them will go extinct. Most of them will disappear. But they will continue to evolve independently. When you look at the evolution of money in this environment, you have to realize that there are many factors that affect this evolution. One of the factors is us, human beings. We give these things life. This evolution is not evolution by random mutation. It is directed evolutions by designers. In this room, there are people who are directing the evolution of these new currencies. And in doing so, they're responding to environmental stimuli. Supply, demand, the needs of customers, the applications that they have in mind, untapped markets and opportunities that traditional currencies can't fit in. And they direct the evolution of these currencies in that direction in order to take advantage of these new niches. But there's also a broader environment, because at the same time that these new currencies are evolving, the old currencies are in crisis. We are now facing an unprecedented currency crisis around the world that is affecting hundreds of currencies, hundreds of countries, and it is affecting every central bank. We are in an environment that hasn't happened in the last 200 years. When I was growing up and I was studying just some basic macroeconomics, economic orthodoxy said that the lowest you can go with interest rates is 0, and you never go there. Never go full 0. And yet, now, 24 different central banks are at 0, and not just temporarily. Some of them for 8 years. Some of them longer. I think the Japanese bank is the longest at 0. And some of them have also gone negative. Never go full negative. Even the concept of negative interest rates wasn't orthodox economics until a couple of years ago. It was unthinkable. Bitcoin is not going to destroy central banks. Bitcoin doesn't give a damn about central banks. Central banks are doing a pretty good job destroying themselves. And the reason is because we live in a world where billions of people have no access to finance, have no access to banking, have no access to traditional financial instruments. They operate entirely in cash in a single currency, isolated from the rest of the world, and that is an environment into which Bitcoin can thrive. We're not going after the environmental niche of traditional banking because there's a bigger environmental niche.